Okay, guys, good morning and welcome to session number 4 of 4. This is our last one, as you know.
Kevin, it's great to have you join us. This is Tom Mobus talking to you, and it's great to have you with us this morning, Kevin. Thank you very much for coming.
Well, good morning. Thank you. It's a great opportunity to talk with you and to tell our story and to interact with people besides that I'm interacting with every day. We're in a little pod. We still come to work every day, so it's like 20 people, and we're all tired of talking to each other. So it's nice to talk to somebody.
It's nice to see someone actually in an office these days. You know, everyone we're all meeting and we're all with these pretend backgrounds behind us or whatever. So it's good to see someone in an office. I thought before we get into the specific questions that people have, you know, we're here with the Pandemic Shift Workshop participants. I thought maybe you could just give us a short story about what you had to do in the bank to actually make this pivot happen in order to get to the point where you could change the way the bank worked and respond to the need and have so many loans go out to help so many businesses in Suffolk County and beyond. Can you tell us a short story about that?
No, I think it was the nature of the bank. And we were actually B&B Bank. We were Bridgehampton National. We changed our charter, so it's B&B Bank. But it's a 110-year-old institution that's always believed in and it's been involved in its community all along. You know, we grew up in Bridgehampton, the bank on Main Street, and many of our locations still on Main Street. And as soon as this hit, you know, we saw our customers be the first people to be shut down. And so we reacted very quickly with some, we called them sort of emergency loans, $50,000 very quickly for people to do what they needed to do. And some of it was just what we had to do. We had to go out and buy 250 laptops. And so for us as a larger company, that's easy. But if you're a smaller company, you got to send 10 people home. You got to figure out how to go do that. And you've got to hire a consultant. So we did things like that. And then when the PPP program or the CARES Act was passed, we recognized that this was going to be something that would be right in the wheelhouse for our customers. And we were an SBA lender already. But you know, this was a whole different, you know, they were going to try and do in one day what they used to do in a year from sort of volume. And so we quickly started to make a list. We recognized what the process was going to be. We had to change because there was no application at first, and they came out with a different application. But it was really, quite honestly, trying to rally the 200 odd people that were home and all of our 40 branches in a way that we could basically hit the ground running when this happened. We broke it originally. The gentleman who runs my lending group, he's a big sports guy, so we broke into 10 teams. We gave them all New York names. We bought hats, and we tried to organize ourselves around sort of smaller subgroups. Some of that, again, we had to change and pivot, if you will, because some of that didn't work. But it was really recognizing the need. It was, you know, leveraging a big workforce that felt that this was something that they wanted to do.
So I mean, if you look at the PPP program, how has it worked for the businesses that have gone through it? Do you think it's really helped them through this situation? Has it helped them sort of survive for this period? Now, as many of them have gotten to the end of it, what do you think is next? How do you think people are going to take the next step to survive as we move forward through this situation?
Well, so I think it was really meant as a lifeline. It was, you know, if you were a business that was totally shut down, it was going to give you some money to pay the bills, to keep sort of the lights on, if you will, and create some online presence. Listen, the truth will be, the answers will come out at the back end of this as to how many businesses ultimately survive. But I do think it was a quick way to get money in people's hands. It provided opportunities if you were still working, that if revenues were not coming in or your customers couldn't pay you, you continue to do services. As of now, the thing that's interesting in the part of the challenge in answering this question is that there was originally an 8-week period, and then they were going to begin a forgiveness process. That probably is going to be extended to 24 weeks. It's on the president's desk today, and it's going to change the percentage that needed to be spent on payroll from 75 to 60. So it's another example that this has been a moving target we've all been dealing with.
Right.
I think we'll look back and say that the SBA did a nice job in using the banks that have a system in place already to distribute cash and grant credit. And so I think that worked. I think for a lot of our customers that are starting to get back to work, if they didn't spend the money in that period, that 8-week period, because they weren't working and they didn't have employees, now it's going to provide them the money, the startup capital. If you're a restaurant, you got to restock your shelves. If you're we have a solar company that, he was struggling because he had taken the money and he couldn't work, and he only went back to work last week. And now he's going to have another 16 weeks to spend that money. So he's probably dancing in the street. I do think that, we shut down the world on March 15th. And the government came out with a program. It was put in place. Billions of dollars have hit the street. And while there'll be stories of things that may have been done wrong, I think in large part, I'd like to think that this lifeline will get a lot of people to the other side.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. So just about a week ago, New York State announced a sort of similar program called New York Forward. Essentially, it's for people who missed the opportunity with the PPP. And, a lot of the people in the room here are of that. They're very small businesses, a small payroll, and they kind of either didn't get there quick enough or it didn't work out for them. So what's your view of that loan program, and is B&B set to be involved with that? What do you recommend for people who are interested in that?
Well, I will say the PPP program is still viable. We are still making loans every day. And so I think the problem with it is that there's been some of the media has wanted to portray it the wrong way and not gotten that story out. So there is still PPP money available. There are banks that are still involved in it. We are still involved in it. We're probably now to a half a dozen a day. We're doing it for people who, in many cases, thought they couldn't get it or they missed the opportunity, or they heard it wrong, or they're afraid maybe to do something with the federal government. So while the state put this program in place, we signed up early on. We're probably one of the smaller banks that made a commitment to it. It's being run through an organization, Pursuit, that really handles micro type loans, which is what this is. And while I'm a proponent of the PPP because I think it's still there and we should still do it, I think the state program, if it just elevates the discussion to know that there's money out there, that's why we're participating. Because in some ways you could say they're competing, but given sometimes that people get misinformation or what gets filtered to them, the more opportunities and the more resources that are available, that's why we participated. So I'm almost talking out of both sides. If there's PPP money available, and we've done them as small as $2,500. So there's no company too small that can't get PPP money. But if for whatever reason that's not available, that's something that you want to do, the state program, maybe it's some other way to go, and that's why we're participating in both.
Right. And one major difference is still that the PPP is generally a forgivable loan, whereas the New York Forward is a low rate loan. So there is that difference.
And I will say, I think that what's going on now, as I said, the legislation that was passed and signed, or passed and hopefully will be signed today or tomorrow, there's another thought process going through that many of us in our industry, most of my loans, more than half of my loans are less than $78,000. And if you go up to 150,000, almost 3,500 of the 4,000 are less than 150,000. And so the idea is that they're talking about a very short form forgiveness, that this was supposed to be a grant. In some ways, when the CARE Act was written, this was never meant to really be repaid. It was meant to be this lifeline. And somehow, because you get banks involved and all of a sudden it became a loan. So the more they can make that easy to forgive the small dollars, the better. So we're all hoping in our industry that, and I think our lobbying group, the ABA, has sent that out, that a very short form, almost an attestation, I spent the money, and be forgiven. And if there's issues wrong, if there was fraud committed in this, it probably was some of the larger loans. Spend the time worrying about that. And the $150,000 loan, you provided somebody a grant lifeline to potentially get to the other side.
Yep. Now, I want to turn it to the group to see what questions come up from them, but I want to ask a question on behalf of one of the members who's not here today, who actually is looking for money, not so much for disaster relief, but for investment capital for for growth potential for the business as an auto service. They want to add another bay, and so they're looking for just general investment money. Now, does the fact that so much money is going out through these programs, does that make it more difficult to get other credit? How does that look from your perspective?
I think obviously in an environment like this, you may ask a few more questions than you ever did as a lender, but we're still making regular loans.
Okay.
One of the things that in our participation in PPP, we did loans for 1,000 companies that weren't originally our customers. I want them to become our customers. So the only way I'm going to be able to do that is to continue to have, provide financing. And listen, I think there's going to be great business ideas that come out of this, what's going on. And businesses will tend to reinvent themselves and come up with ways to make money they never did before. And you want to be able to participate in that.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because that's what's actually happening in the back room that we came out of in order to join you here, is that there are a lot of good ideas going on among the people that are in this group. So let me turn it to them, and just, I can't see them all because I'm just mostly looking at you right now, but please just jump in. And if you have a question of Kevin O'Connor here, CEO of BNB, please just bring it forward. What do you want to know? Don't be shy.
Mr. O'Connor, this is Stepan Turian, and I'm one of the facilitators for this course. I have a question. If somebody applied for a PPP from a larger institution, can they still apply to you?
Well, if they've gotten it, they can only get one PPP. But if they have not yet,
gotten it.
They can certainly apply through us, because one of the things that you put an EIN number in, and that gives you basically if that loan has been approved or not.
Yep.
And so we have gotten those kind of inquiries, and our people have gone through the SBA system, and quite honestly found that times people were approved and somehow it got lost in the larger bank, or it wasn't approved, and then we can go through the process of doing it and provide them their funding within 2 days.
Wow.
So,
2 days, within 2 days.
Yeah, no, we were doing stuff. I was going to say 1 day, but my people would yell at me. But it's, we've got it down to a good science, if you will. I mean, I think that I've praised our original SBA gentleman up and down in this course of this, because he figured out ways to do things. I'll share. You asked a question before about pivoting and things like that. In trying to figure out how we're going to do this, we had to train lots of people very quickly on the SBA system, and it's not the easiest system to use. Yeah. And so we were using people created with their phone a video watching him on keystrokes and in screens, and we uploaded that to our internal website, and that's how we trained 100 people to do a job that at the beginning of this we had one person knew how to do.
Wow.
Yeah, that's an amazing, there's some amazing stories in the interview that Lily Cushenberry did with you. There's a little talk about some of this training and other things that happened with the people side of it. It's really quite wonderful. All right, back to the group. Other questions? I know that you're out there looking for some money to help with what you want to do, so please bring them forward.
Do you have to have worked with a payroll company for you to be able to receive the PPP?
No, I think if you've got a payroll account that you're paying people from, you should have all those records. It's usually your 941 is what we use. So if you filed a 941 with all your payroll taxes, that I think is the base document we've been using.
I don't have that.
Okay.
Because I've done a lot of I run a DJ company.
Okay.
And we didn't set up, like, we just pay people through a Venmo and stuff like that.
You know what? I would, if offline, and I'm not sure. I'm going to give my bank number here. Whoever want, and my email. If you want to email me, I'll have somebody on my side reach out to you and step you through, because there's things I'm good at, and there's things that the expert. Some of the details, I'll be honest with you, but our people have been very good, because there has been some changes there about 1099s. So there's been evolutions of what's eligible. So I don't want to. My answer is always yes, until my people tell me that I've said yes too many times. So
that's great.
Okay. Do you have also? Do you need to have 2019 tax information? or you still use 18?
I believe you can use 18 because a lot of businesses have not yet filed 19 because they always go an extension until October. A lot of, I know larger businesses do, so I assume that basically they've used 18. So
Yeah.
but I will have my ability to give my email address at the end, so this way I can make sure I get direct any of the people direct questions.
Okay.
Thanks. And by the way, my experience, this is Stefan again. My limited experience last week was you guys do what you say you're going to do. So if Bridgehampton says they will call, they do call. Antoine.
Oh, somebody will. They will call. They will call.
Good to know.
Can I
All
say
right.
something? Can I say something?
Sure,
Um,
sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, jump in, Lydia.
So I applied with Chase Bank, my bank, which I've had for since I opened my store 6 years ago. And all I did was get a confirmation and then some kind of email saying we'll get back to you, and they never got back to me. So annoyed with them. Try to call them. You can't talk to anybody. Went to the, to someone at the branch. They really can't help. Then I went through my payroll company and went through a company that they suggested, and they said, well, we're too overwhelmed, try another bank. And I was so frustrated. And I was waiting for Kevin to come on like last week and the week before. But
Yeah.
somehow the contact of mine in LinkedIn, and I messaged him and he got right back to me. And then he put me in contact with Haley and his company, and she got back to me, and I have all the info. I'm going to send her all my paperwork in today, and I'm very thankful. I'm definitely going to open an account with them, and hopefully,
It's so nice to talk to a human being, isn't it, Lydia?
I'm sorry?
Isn't it so nice to talk to a human being?
Exactly, and have
Oh,
someone get,
God.
that's how I can't stand talking to computers, and people don't even know what they're talking about because
Yeah.
I give them great service, so I expect to get service anywhere else I go, and it's really hard to find these days.
We have a very good team that and I know I've said this, and sometimes I repeat myself, but this was a real opportunity to feel like we could actually do something to help in a difficult time. And we're obviously still in incredibly challenging times, but we all sit and watch the first responders and the people who risk their lives and are saving lives. Bankers normally do that, but it was a chance. The real pain that people were hearing and feeling, and our branches on Main Street, I think I've said before, were open. So when old Main Street was dark, and that can be pretty depressing, it was nice. Our branches were open, and so they still are. I've got a lot of people chomping to get back to. They actually want to come back to the office. Some of them are tired of being home. So
Yeah, right. Can't wait to get to the bank. No, that's great, Kevin. It's a great story, and I think we've been talking to Lydia about where she wants to go with her business, and where she wants to go is a great idea, and I think the bank would love to be part of helping this kind of thing
Yeah,
happen.
even advertise the bank in my front window.
There you go. There you go. Well, listen, we're coming to the end of the time we asked for you. We really appreciate you joining us. I guess I want to just ask one sort of really ballpark question, which is extremely hard to answer, but you've been obviously thinking about this thing. So I'm going to ask and just see, what's your sense of how long you think we're going to be wrestling with the COVID situation? As you think about it, you have to in the role you're in. What's your sense of what's going to happen over the rest of the year?
I think we're going to be dealing with it certainly for the balance of this year. I think it's affecting how people are going to deal with their summer, taking care of children. We all don't know what school is going to look like in September. We have a workforce that relies a lot on childcare and things like that, and so that's going to be a challenge. I think how quickly we can get some of these Main Street businesses open, how quickly they can adapt, and whether it be for restaurants, sidewalk seating, whether it be for retail that could be curbside, different things that. And obviously, we have to worry about sort of a resurgence of the virus. But there's an anxiousness of people to get back to business and get back to work. There's I think, a view that people want to help each other out. And so I'm optimistic, obviously cautious with everything that continues to evolve. But it feels like there's going to be partnerships between government and the private sector to try and move us all forward, and that's what I'm hopeful for. We're invested in this community in a large way. This is where I grew up, and so you want to see it succeed. I think, until we get some real answers as to what's going to look like in the fall, there'll be some questions, but I think this is certainly, 2020 will all be affected by it.
Right. Kevin O'Connor, thanks so much for joining us. Well, let's take everyone off mute and give them a little round of applause for joining us. Thank you.
Great. So we're going to have one more final kind of round robin discussion. I'm going to try to context that quickly so that we have time to wrap up at the end. The idea of a pivot, we've been talking about shift, and we see pivot as a kind of special kind of shift. It's a shift where you're really making a major change, maybe even more than some of what people have been thinking of, to important areas of your business, your customer values, value proposition, customer base, operations, and so forth. In some cases, people have been working, on changing the way that they deliver, but a lot of their other operations are the same, or they're selling to the same customer, or they're kind of offering the same value proposition. A pivot is somewhat more than that. It's sort of more fundamental change. It's kind of comes from basketball. It's a phrase that's used in business. It comes from basketball. It's the idea of you keep one foot on the floor, but the other foot goes in a different direction entirely. So and it may it may or may not be right for you, but if it is right for you, it may open up real opportunities for long-term growth, not just survival, but long-term growth, for exponential growth potentially, kind of 2x, 10x growth, or a more sustainable and resilient model, so that really, your business is really on solid ground. Next slide. If we look at, some of the, examples we looked at, going back to the Ed Fabian example, he did a real pivot. It's a shift, but it's a pivot. It's a major shift from data center security to COVID cleaning. Same customers, which is interesting. Same staff, but very different product or service. But interestingly, a somewhat similar value proposition: safety and security. So big shift, different products and service, but still kept his foot on the ground in these other areas. So that's kind of what we think of as a pivot. Next slide. So we're going to do an exercise, where we're going to kind of encourage you to imagine a pivot, a major pivot. Even thinking about it is some ways takes you out of your comfort zone, but it doesn't have to be about panic. It's more about stretch. So the idea is that we want to encourage exploring ideas. Again, you don't have to do these, but let's, kind of as an exercise for a few minutes, let's think about how far you can take the changes you're making. What really new horizons you might imagine, but still keeping one foot firmly on the ground in terms of what who you're selling to, who you are, who you're selling to, or some aspect of your thing is still your own business, but how can it change that would open up really new opportunities or really new horizons for you? Okay, so next slide. So here's the exercise. You don't have to do all of them. We won't have time probably, but we might do a round robin. What if you could grow your business 10 times as big? What would that look like? Or what if if you could get your dream business, really your ideal business? What would that look like? And we did some of this in the earlier session. If the pandemic went away next month, what would you keep from what you're doing, and kind of continue it long term? So we don't have to think through all of these for each person in the breakout session, but pick one of these and sort of brainstorm or sort of open up your mind and kind of riff on what those possibilities would be.
And if this was good for you, please let other people know, because we're going to be our plan was to do this for a few hundred businesses over the course of the rest of the year. So we would love it if you would let a friend of yours who's in business know about this program if you thought it was good for you. So please help us with referrals.
I think that you guys are amazing, and we all learned in this. Not just you, but we also learned in our subgroup, we went through a couple of pivots that Shift Group went through, and it was great to see how you guys started versus where you ended up. And you're not in the same place you were 2-3 weeks ago. So it's really cool to see the growth in all of you guys. So thank you.